All right, let's get into it. We're going to tackle a question that I think is on a lot of developers' minds. What's the real difference between just being a React coder and becoming a true React architect? We're going to break it all down using 4 key pillars that really define a senior-level developer. So let's just ask it straight up. What really separates a senior React dev from everyone else? Is it just about putting in the years, just clocking in the time? Honestly, no. The real jump, the big leap, happens when your perspective shifts. When you go from just knowing how to do something to really deeply understanding why you're doing it that way in the first place.
So to make this journey clear, we've laid out this roadmap with 4 pillars. First, mastering the core. Then, wielding advanced tools. After that, we'll talk about architecting scalable systems. And we'll wrap it up with what I call the performance mindset. This is our game plan for going from coder to architect.
Okay, let's kick things off with pillar number 1, mastering the core. This is all about getting past the surface level. It's not enough to just use React's features. A senior dev genuinely understands what's happening under the hood. They get why React is as fast and efficient as it is.
And there's no better example of this than the virtual DOM. Just think of it like a lightweight blueprint of your actual user interface, one that lives completely in memory. Now, instead of making changes directly to the slow, heavy, real DOM every time something small updates, React plays with this blueprint first. It's a simple concept, but it's absolutely fundamental to React's performance. But why?
Well, it's all thanks to this super clever process called reconciliation. Look at how it works. When some state changes, React doesn't just throw everything out and start over. Nope. First, it just creates a new blueprint, a new virtual DOM tree. Then, and this is the magic part, it runs a diffing algorithm to compare the new blueprints to the old one. It finds the absolute bare minimum that changed, and then it applies only those tiny minimal changes to the actual DOM. That right there, that's the secret sauce.
And this deep dive thinking, it doesn't stop there. Take keys when you're rendering a list. A senior developer knows that a key isn't just there to make a console warning go away. It is essential for helping that reconciliation process figure out which items in a list have changed, moved, or disappeared. It's a huge performance win. The same goes for really understanding the component lifecycle with useEffect, knowing how React's event system works, or even grasping how your fancy JSX gets turned into plain old JavaScript.
Okay, so once you've got that solid foundation, what's next? That brings us to our second pillar, wielding advanced tools. Now, this is not about having a checklist of every hook memorized. It's about looking at a complex problem and knowing exactly which specialized tool to pull out of your toolbox to solve it elegantly. Let's talk about a classic pain point, prop drilling. Oh man, we have all felt this, right? You're just passing some data down through component after component after component, maybe 5, 6, 10 levels deep. It's messy, it's super fragile, and it's an absolute nightmare to try and refactor later. So what's the senior developer's move here? Use context. This hook is the perfect, elegant solution. It basically lets you create a pocket of global state that any component way down the tree can just reach out and grab, completely skipping all those components in the middle. Problem solved. Clean and simple. Now let's look at 2 hooks that trip up a lot of people when it comes to optimization. UseMemo and useCallback. Here's the simplest way to think about it. UseMemo saves or caches the result of an expensive calculation. UseCallback, on the other hand, caches the function itself. That's super important when you're passing functions as props to child components, because it prevents them from re-rendering unnecessarily.
And the toolkit just keeps going. Seniors know exactly when useReducer is the right call for some gnarly, complex state logic, or when to use useRef to get direct access to a DOM element. But I think most importantly, they master creating their own custom hooks. This is a total game changer for pulling out logic, reusing it, and keeping your code incredibly clean.
And that idea of creating reusable pieces leads us perfectly into pillar number 3, architecting scalable systems. This is probably the biggest mental leap you make on the path to seniority. You stop thinking about just building one-off components, and you start designing entire applications that are built to last, to grow, and to be maintained by a team.
A classic architectural pattern is this idea of separating your components into 2 camps. You've got presentational components. You can think of these as dumb components. They only care about how things look. Then you have container components. These are the smart ones. They manage the state, they fetch the data, they handle all the logic of how things work. Separating these 2 concerns makes your codebase so much easier to reason about. This architectural mindset also applies to one of the biggest decisions in any React app, state management. A senior developer doesn't just reach for Redux every single time. They look at the project and make a strategic choice. Is this a smaller app where the built-in context API is totally fine? Or is this a massive enterprise application that really needs the structure of something like Redux Toolkit? Or hey, maybe most of our state is coming from a server, in which case a tool like React Query is the absolute best fit.
And the architect's checklist just keeps going. You're thinking about things like code splitting with React.lazy to make sure your app loads super fast. You're implementing error boundaries so that one little bug in a component doesn't crash your entire application. It's all about thinking ahead, designing a folder structure that can scale, and using tools like TypeScript to make your code safer and more robust.
Okay, and that brings us to our fourth and final pillar, the performance mindset. This is so important. This isn't just a task you check off at the end of a sprint. For a senior developer, performance is baked into how you think and how you work every single day, from the very beginning.
I love this quote because it really hits the nail on the head. The key word here is proactive. You are not waiting around for users to start complaining that the app feels sluggish. You are constantly thinking about performance, anticipating where the bottlenecks might be, and building for speed and reliability from the ground up.
So what does being proactive actually look like? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is having a really smart, balanced testing strategy. It's a mix of things, right? You've got your low-level unit tests for sure. But in the modern React world, the real focus is on component tests, using something like React Testing Library. Why? Because it lets you test your components the same way a user actually interacts with them. And then you top it all off with end-to-end tests to make sure all the pieces are working together perfectly.
And to really round it all out, a senior developer is comfortable diving into the browser's performance profiling tools, hunting down those tricky bottlenecks, and squashing them. They also understand the whole CI/CD pipeline, how their code automatically gets built, tested, and deployed out to the world. It's about taking ownership of the entire process.
So, let's just bring it all home. Your path from coder to architect, it's really built on these 4 pillars. 1, really truly master the core concepts, the why. 2, learn to use advanced tools and patterns like a pro. 3, start to think like an architect, designing whole systems, not just little components. And 4, always cultivate that proactive performance mindset. That is your blueprint for growth.
And I just want to leave you with this one last thought to chew on. The tools are going to change. React itself will change. New hooks will come out. Some new state management library will be the next big thing. But the principles we talked about today, that deep understanding, architectural thinking, and a relentless focus on quality and performance, those things are timeless. So the real question is, what do you think will define seniority 5 years from now? Thanks for tuning in.